Hi, Monica Miller here, Legal Director and Senior Counsel of the American Humanist Association. This is Legal Tuesdays, where I answer your questions about separation of church and state. I will start with a question from Ed Baker, who asks on Facebook, Ohio funds Christian charter schools. Is this legal? The answer, it depends. I don't know about Ohio's charter school program. I don't know. The facts I would really need to know are what form of funding are these Christian charter schools getting? Is it in the form of vouchers that are given to parents to decide where to send their kids to school? Are they given, is it just direct state money in the form of some sort of grant to the schools themselves? Is it through taxpayers as the intermediary? And then also I'd be curious to know, many states have their own no aid provisions that go somewhat above and beyond what the federal Establishment Clause does, in saying that you cannot use state funding to support or fund parochial religious education. I don't recall if Ohio is one of those states. I think it might be. I'd have to look into that as well. Frankly, there's a Supreme Court case pending right now, Espinoza versus Montana State Treasury, I think, which involves a similar issue of Montana basically channeling through tax credits, or sort of a nuanced procedure, but basically they're more or less directly through taxpayers channeling money to fund religious schools. And the Montana Supreme Court said you can't do that. And then the religious schools are now claiming essentially that it's discriminatory to not give them this funding, which as common sense dictates, sort of circumvents the entire notion of separation of church and state when we're funding religious education with our taxpayer dollars. So it'll be interesting to see how that Supreme Court case shakes out. We actually did submit an amicus brief arguing, of course, that the Montana Supreme Court was correct, that you cannot channel state taxpayer funds to support or fund religious education. So yes, if you want me to look more into this, just shoot me an email, mmiller@americanhumanist.org, and I will look more into the Ohio issue. Like I said, I don't think we would take any action at this point while that Supreme Court case is pending. Even if the issues are not identical, that case would certainly have a bearing on how other schools get funded. I'd also be curious to know what the funding is going towards with the Christian charter school. If it's going to completely secular aspects like refurbishing buildings or putting some tan bark in the playgrounds, that might be upheld. If it is to pay for teachers' salaries or religious books or ministers or religious garb and iconography, that would be a much bigger problem under both historic precedent and current precedent. I will answer one more. We have Donna Cobb says on Facebook, why am I forced to vote inside a stadium megachurch? Every election we are forced to see the wanton use of tax-free money on everything but worship when we have several more appropriate venues nearby. I think I got to this similar question like this in another video. There's been several courts that have basically upheld challenges to the use of religious venues, churches, for polling places. The rationale in those cases typically was that there wasn't alternative venues, or they were not adequate, they were maybe too small. They also hinged on the fact that I think absentee voting was an option, so you wouldn't have to, it wouldn't be your only choice to go to the mega church. If that is the case, if your only polling place that you can go to is this church, I think we do have a problem, and I would want to look into it a little bit closer. We are tracking these, so feel free to shoot us information about the particular mega church, what kind of iconography and religious symbols sort of were on display at the time. This isn't the best time to bring such a case. I'm hearing mega church, so I instantly think Texas or somewhere in a jurisdiction that we wouldn't want to file in at this point in time. If I'm wrong, if this is in California or something, we actually could consider a lawsuit. So if you want me to look more into this, or if you want to consider legal action, shoot me an email. I think that's actually all we have time for today. I'm keeping it a little shorter than last one. But stay tuned, and I look forward to talking to you at the next Legal Tuesdays.